People don't change that much. The most you can expect a person to change is about 5%.
Are you hoping your partner's going to change and save the relationship? Well, to address that question, Dr. Becky Whetstone, author of I Think I Want Out, talks about the reality of change in toxic relationships. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Becky Whetstone, who just has a new book out called I Think I Want to Leave. And I'm really excited to have you here, Dr. Whetstone, because there's a big problems that happen when people are trying to leave a relationship. Should they leave when maybe they shouldn't? They should try harder. I remember actually meeting someone who said they regretted it because they found the second marriage was just as tough as the first. But there's a lot of people, and this is a group I see, who are in a marriage and working way too hard and probably their only member who's working, and they don't recognize that they should leave. So first of all, I'd love to get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in this topic.
Well, I'm a native Arkansan, so that will explain the Southern accent that everyone hears here. And I moved to Texas when I was in my mid-20s and married a Texan. But prior to that, when I was a kid, I was always very interested in relationships. I always read the advice columns in every magazine, and I wanted to be Ann Landers and Dear Abby and those kind of guys. So my life stream was to be a advice columnist. And I did get a degree in journalism. So I moved to Texas and become a housewife at that time. And I married a guy who ended up being very difficult and probably was a narcissist. And he was very seductive on the front end of the relationship, extremely loving, just very validating. And I just couldn't believe how lucky I was. So handsome and all those things, a great job. And then about 6 months into our marriage, he just turned cold on me, like just shut the door on me. Like it was like a night and day thing. And I was just like, oh my God, what happened? And at that time we were in Australia. We were spending a year in Australia for part of his job. And this is before the internet, everyone. There wasn't even CNN back then. This was like 1985. Phone calls were like $8 an hour. I mean, I had no support system and I was just freaking out. And so for the next 5 years, I kind of begged him to come back out and play with me, go back to how he was. And he would sometimes bite my head off for doing that and embarrass me, like by leaving me stranded in a restaurant or something, and I'd have to get a taxi home. Or sometimes he would just say, okay, I will in a couple of weeks or after this next big thing at work. And over time, I realized that he was not going to do it. I mean, I realized he's a talker and not a doer. But at the same time, he was cold and mean and controlling. And so my feelings toward the marriage were deteriorating significantly. I mean, he left for work before me and the kids woke up and returned about bedtime. He would gobble down some food and go to sleep. And he worked on weekends also. So I felt like I was a single mom who couldn't date in a way. Toward maybe the last year, I'm sort of telling him the train's leaving the station. Like, oh, I can't hang on. And then he did something so nasty. I voted for somebody for president that he didn't like. But that person won. And in 19, whatever it was, he said, okay, so when he gets sworn in January, he wants to raise our taxes by 6%. So I am going to dock your allowance by 6%. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I just told myself, I can't be married to someone that would be so damn mean, because he was making a ton more money every year. We did not have financial problems. He was an orthopedic surgeon, and his practice was exploding. It just was done out of purity, meanness, and control. And I told him, if you do that, there's going to be hell to pay. And he did it. I told myself when I got that check in my hand, I said, well, you're going to get divorced this year, sucker. Then I just started biding my time and found an opportunity to sit him down and say, I'm at the end of the line. I want you to move out. I cannot handle it. And therein began our marriage crisis. And so we went to a marriage therapist, and the marriage therapist said, well, if you're not motivated to work on the marriage, Becky, which I wasn't at that time, then there's nothing I can do. So you two go on and separate or whatever. And if you get motivated to work on the marriage, come back. And he was, like I said, a very difficult person. I called him a hard ass. He just was difficult about everything, and he would always be mean. And he was a mean person to be separated from and to be going through a marriage crisis with, but we had no one coaching us or anything like that. And I kept telling him, either if there's any chance to save this marriage, you need to be nice to me right now. And he told me, I can't. I can't. So we ended up divorced, I think prematurely. Our two little kids paid such a heavy price for that. And the thing that bugged me the most was, why couldn't the marriage therapist coach us, help us, and tell us what was going on, explain things to us? Because it was a crazy experience, a crazy phenomenon with our nervous systems all kicked up. So soon after that, I got a job at the newspaper as a writer, and I started writing about relationships for the San Antonio Express News, and I became kind of a relationship guru in town. I was on radio and TV and of course in the paper, and the public would gripe that I didn't have credentials. So somebody told me, Becky, just go get a mail order degree to shut these people. And I said, nah, Becky's going to do the real thing if she's going to do it at all. I'm not going to have to apologize to anybody. So I went to graduate school. And then while I was in graduate school, I kind of fell in love with marriage and family therapy. And I spent every opportunity that I could do some research on my own to try and answer that question. Why couldn't that marriage therapist help us when we had a marriage crisis? And sure enough, I learned that they didn't teach it in graduate school. We had a divorce and remarriage class. They never mentioned marriage crisis or anything like that or strategies for that. Then I'm looking at the research and stuff, and I'm going, oh my God, there's this great information out there that people would really benefit from knowing. And if nobody else is going to put it out there in the mainstream, then I feel duty bound to do that. So as soon as I graduated from grad school in 2006, I started writing this book that only came out this past February. So I've been writing on it for 20 years, but I couldn't find anyone to publish it because they said it was too negative, because they wanted me to save every marriage at the very end of the book. And it was really about a phenomenon of marriage crisis. And I named it, I Think I Want Out, What to Do When One of You Wants to End Your Marriage, because it's describing from the moment someone walks in the room and says, I think I want out, to how to handle it from start to finish, all the way through whether you reconcile, whether you divorce, and then the co-parenting and blending families and all that kind of stuff. So I'm now like kind of cradling people through this long process, and it's just filling a void. And now I'm traveling around the United States to marriage and family therapy conferences, trying to get them to make this a thing in our program that is commonly known about by therapists. But there's so much good information in there. And for people that are currently married, teaches you how to diagnose your marriage. It goes over common mental disorders and personality disorders, so you can be filled in on that. It also tells you how to discern whether you're being abused or not. And these are all important things that you need to consider when you are on the fence about whether to stay or go. So, yeah, I just want people to make an educated decision and come out of that saying, I did everything I could to save the marriage, and then admitting that some marriages can't be saved. And here it is in this book, and this therapist is telling me that these things can't be fixed. So maybe you can leave with less guilt.
Right. You have a really fantastic analogy that I love. And I talked about it similarly when I was counseling people, but in a very different way. And I love the language that you use. You talk about the leaning in versus the decider. And this is the analogy I always use, and feel free to use it if you want to. It's like a marriage to me is like two people on a raft boat out in the middle of nowhere. And one of them falls into the water and they're in trouble. And they try to get the attention of the person. Hello, I'm in trouble. Please help me. Please save me. Please invest something here to save us. And the person who's in the raft boat, for some reason, doesn't seem to realize their partner is in crisis. They ignore all the signs and signals that that their partner is drowning and leaving. And eventually the partner in the water drowns and disappears. And then the partner in the boat suddenly wakes up and thinks, oh, my partner's not here. And then they start to thrash and get frantic and do a lot of effort. But by then, the partner's already gone and they can't ever get them back. So that's what I picked up. And I love that you're addressing that. Why do you think people who are the ones who are not recognizing the signs and signals that there's something going wrong in a relationship? You and I both are clinicians. We could look at this like there's personality types, but can you kind of put maybe what you think in big, large lists of what causes a lack of awareness to another partner's distress?
Well, first of all the research shows that both partners were going through the process and were unhappy. It's just that one of them is going to be the one that makes a stand and says, I think I want out. So both people are unhappy. But one of the crazy phenomenons I learned when I was researching was, in fact, this book called Uncoupling by Vaughan, a sociologist, was one of the first researchers to delineate the stages in which a marriage dies. And her book is called Uncoupling. And she has this sentence that I can never forget in that book. And she says, uncoupling begins with a secret. And the secret is, I am extremely unhappy in this marriage, and I'm going to have an internal conversation with myself about this, and I'm not going to share it with my partner. In fact, the partner is going to be the last to know. But you can tell it in kind of passive aggressive things along the way as the person becomes more and more unhappy. But it blows my mind how many people are sitting there and heading toward a divorce, eventual marriage crisis, impossible divorce, who have had kids with the person. They've had sex with a person. They go on trips with a person and never have had the courage to tell them, I'm seriously struggling in this relationship. But this is a phenomenon. I'm working with somebody right now, married 30 years, has 2 college-age kids, and he is barely hanging on in his marriage, and he still hasn't told his wife he's struggling in the marriage. It just blows my mind.
Okay, here's the part that blows my mind, though. And I've had 2 marriages. The first ended when he passed away. I was widowed. And the second marriage was a divorce. And the second marriage, by the way, was clinically, I believe he has a narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, mixed personality presentation. Okay, so marriage number 1, really long, but many times in the marriage, I thought, I want out. I'm not happy. I wouldn't even mind if something happened that got me out.
You mean like death?
Yeah, I never want
A
to
lot
say
of
it.
people have death fantasies. And for those of you out there that have them and say, if he would just die, it'd be perfect. Don't
Yeah.
feel bad. There's thousands of others just like you.
Yeah, and I felt ashamed of it. So then when I got the news that he had terminal cancer,
Oh, no.
you can imagine there was a mix of, I've never said this aloud, relief, but grief. And of course, I then began the heavy work of grieving, which was more devastating than I ever thought it would be. But there was also some relief because of the hard parts of the relationship was over. What even made the grief harder was he had a recognition. I think this was what made the loss of him even worse, was that he recognized as he was dying the way he had failed me and started actively talking. I've blown it here. I've ruined it with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that
yeah.
helpful to you from a healing?
Yes, but also sad because I knew I never got to live with that new version.
Wow.
So it was like I was losing what I wanted, but at least I got closure around the recognition of the way he had blown it with me. Now I'm feeling teary. I'm coming up on his 10th anniversary of his death. So this has been quite a period of, I've been kind of really retrospective and reflective. And so it was a painful but welcomed acknowledgement of what had gone wrong.
Wow, what a story. That's a powerful story. Well, you believe it or not, years ago, because I always thought all widows were sad and just devastated to see their partner go and how sad that was. But no, somebody wrote an anonymous letter to Ann Landers and said, my husband died last week and everybody's being so sweet to me and nice, and they don't know how happy I am that the bomb is gone at last. And so as a layperson back then, I was like, oh my God. So not everybody's unhappy when their spouse dies. Of course not. I've known quite a few people who were completely relieved when their spouse passed away.
So my question is this, and I'm actually a little embarrassed to ask you this. I assumed everybody at one point or another had that secret thought.
Of divorce?
Yeah.
Look, truth be told, I think a huge amount of people have the thought briefly, but not seriously. And I think some people wonder, like, is this all there is? I feel kind of stuck here. But they're not in the deterioration process that research shows. Because what'll happen is in the beginning, the first stage is disillusionment. Oh, I think I'm unhappy. But I know marriages have ups and downs, so I'll just wait and see how it goes. But when they hit stage 2 and they go, "No, this is serious. This isn't going away, and it could lead to divorce." That's the missing piece that the people who I could get a divorce and probably be okay, but they're not in stage 2 saying, "No, this is serious. This could lead to divorce, but I don't want a divorce." And so they decide that they're unhappy, but at least for the time being, they're not gonna divorce, and they always have many reasons why they don't want a divorce. So that's stage 2. So I don't think those of us who've ever had those fleeting divorce thoughts reach that stage of seriousness.
I see another phenomena, though, and this is something kind of ties more into the audience that I know listens to this, is that many of them, they are so long suffering. They have a personality trait, so they're very agreeable people. They have a lot of conscientiousness. And they can sense that if they make a radical decision, and if it's wrong, they don't know if they can live with themselves. They don't know if they can live with the damage they may have done to their family or to their kids. And they also know that probably with this partner, there's no take back. What things should they be paying attention to that would really help them know this isn't savable? I can't tell you how often I get asked that question.
Well,
you know?
first of all, I had this really wise professor, and I talk about him in my book, Dr. Coiner. I think I even talk about this anecdote that I'm getting ready to give you. He told us one night, people don't change that much. The most you can expect a person to change is about 5%. And I was like, wow. Because I think that before you start like really studying this and then working in the field and stuff, we all imagine people can really change and grow. But I'm one of the people that I think is in the 5% that I started out life. I was raised by narcissists, and my siblings were all narcissists, and I was the baby of the family. And so I came out of that pretty messed up. And so I was having train wreck young adulthood, but I had a voice in my head that said, you need to go figure this out because this isn't the way you're supposed to be. And I wanted to go find out, am I crazy? Are they crazy? Or are we all crazy? So I was in the 5% of people who are seekers, and they grew up in a very damaged environment, and they seek to climb out of it, and they go get help, okay? But 95% of people are complacent, and they are not seekers, and I'm into childhood trauma. I was trained by Pia Mellody, who wrote Facing Codependence, and the reason she calls the book Facing Codependence is because people with childhood trauma won't face the things they need to face to go into recovery from it. They literally sit in their unhappiness and do nothing. That's 95% of the population in my view, in my experience. And so I think most therapists know, like we want to help everybody. We want to see everybody do a 180 and just thrive, but you get out of it what you put into it. And if you're in the 95% of it, you're just not gonna fight for it. You have to fight for it.
Dr. George Simon, in his book, Character Disturbance, there's a list of behaviors he says that looks like pro-change behavior when they're actually responsibility avoidance. And I think a lot of us miss that. And it certainly was true in my second relationship that I ended up marrying the worst combination of my childhood trauma. Any bad person I could have ever met in my life, I felt like was like packed into this one person.
Oh my
And what was
God. Picture a monster with a bunch of heads.
Well, in fact, I actually told him, if I had this conversation with him, I wrote about it. It's in a book called Love You More. I actually said to him, what I realized is I thought you were a good guy who sometimes is a monster. And I realized you're a monster who sometimes is a good guy. He literally turned gray, started sweating, and then said, I'm glad.
Oh, cringe.
Yeah, I know. I know. But one of the things he did that was so good, and I see this over and over in my membership, and that is he would do pro-change behavior. He was going to therapy. He was reading the books. He was underlying the books he was reading. He'd have discussions with me about the topics, and it looked like he was working while he was secretly doing things that were devastating to the relationship, massive betrayals to the relationship. So it was all a ruse. It wasn't real. But how many times I see that this intermittent reinforcement of, no, it's going to get better. Sometimes people know how to keep the other person just in it enough so that they don't leave until the person who's really not invested decides it's over on their terms.
Well, I think he had a sense of when I was at the end of my rope, and he would be nice to me for a little while. And and I told myself, he just senses when I've just run out of patience with this.
But many people don't have the insight that you had, that you picked that up and then identified it. A lot of people don't identify that. So how can they get better at seeing that?
I think that a huge part of being a healthy adult is being super tuned in to yourself. And I tell people, you're like a radio station tuned into whatever radio station you are, but you have to be tuned into your spouse's radio station as well. And when you're tuned into someone else, you pick up on their energy. Your intuition can feel things. You can feel things in yourself, but you can feel things and vibes coming from other people. And so I just think being self-aware and then aware of the energy of others around you and really paying attention is what helps me pick up on those things. I can see it in my clients. And you're talking about people who underline books, but they're really not going to change. Some of them are putting on a performance.
Right.
Putting on a performance. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is they go back to what they were doing. Like if the person ends up divorcing them anyway, they're not going to keep on their self-help journey. They're only doing it to keep you from leaving at that moment, and they'll go back. I was working in the last year with someone who's a terrible control freak and narcissist, and his wife was just in anguish, just fed up and crying, like just so sad to see. He's just worn her out. And so he said to me, what happens if I do all this work and she doesn't change and she doesn't take me back? And I said, you need to do this for yourself, not to win her back. And he said, well, what if my next partner likes it? And I said, they won't.
Do you think he believed you?
I think he did, but I mean, he ended up firing me, as most narcissists do.
Yeah.
When sometimes, in this particular case with this particular couple, the woman over time became more and more of a basket case, an emotional, falling apart, just crying basket case. As she was separated, she was loving the separation. She did not miss him. She does not love him. And so I said to her in one of our managed separation meetings, you look like you're ready to end this. And I told her, I don't know how much more you can take. Your health is really going to start breaking apart if you stay like you have been the past few weeks. So are you ready to end this now? And she said, I am. I really am. I'm ready to end it now. I'm ready to divorce. So we ended the session, and then he canceled all our sessions after that. Like, no more.
Yeah. I suspect mine didn't continue the minute that he left me finally. And I think the minute he walked out, and I needed that, by the way, that was safer for me. This guy, I figured if I left him in the wrong way, there was going to be danger. So I wanted him to leave me.
Yeah.
So when he left me, I'm assuming he never saw his therapist again.
I think the guy who fired me, though, just went back to controlling and trying to pull her back, suck her back into the marriage. He somehow talked her into not divorcing. It's just so long as divorce wasn't on the table, he'd play the game. But I guarantee you right now he's somewhere trying to suck her back in and avoid divorce.
Well, it comes back to what you said, only 5% change.
And so guys out there, chances are your partner's not going to change. And even if they did change, it isn't going to be that much. Even the 5%ers sometimes don't change that much.
Well, yeah, that was the other statistic I had heard. I don't remember the percentage, but the percentage of difference was very minuscule. Even in the best of circumstances. And you and I both can attest to that, to what we've seen in the office. People don't profoundly shift their identity. It is what it is. Maybe they might soften some edges and be a little less brisk or crude or hurtful around some things. But when it really comes down to the day, this is who this person is.
There's no doubt. You can't change someone's personality. That's a finite thing. Now, they can change their beliefs and values and
habits
and learn boundaries, and they can work on their self-esteem and things like that. But how many people are going to do it? Not that many. I wish we taught all this in junior high so people could learn what it is to be healthy in junior high, but we don't.
Yeah.
And our culture doesn't teach us, and our families are terrible examples. And my clients sit out there having all these great expectations of humans and humanity. And I'm like, what? 95% are pretty dysfunctional. Like, why are you having these high expectations of people? You expect people aren't going to lie, and you expect people aren't going to do the wrong thing. I mean, we have a dysfunctional culture. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, that was a statistic that shocked me. Years and years ago, I asked a similar question. One of my supervisors in graduate training was the disciplinary chairman of the state for psychologists. And so I asked him, and I knew he'd seen lots of people. He had a private practice. He also worked at psychiatric hospitals, so just saw lots and lots of people. And he was seeing psychologists, too, who were in trouble. So I just knew he had a very fascinating perspective. So I said, what percentage of all of us do you think is healthy? He said 7%. I don't know where he ever got that number, but I'm like, crap, that's not good. I mean, like, geez, that's less than, it's slightly more than 1 in 5.
I hate to come on here and tell all your listeners that the situation is bleak, but it is. It just is. So then at the end of the day, like, and Dr. Coiner, and this is another thing I put in my book because he was such a wise man, he told us that when you have a problem, there's only 3 solutions. One is accept things the way they are. The next is to try and create change. But we just had a long conversation about odds, people changing. And then the last one is to get rid of it. So those of you that are married to people that aren't going to change, you have 2 choices. Accept it the way it is and stop griping about it. Just be all in and find some way to be happy on your own within this crazy mess, or get away from it.
Yeah. I know for those who are very stickler about statistics that I said it wrong, it's less than 1 in 10 is healthy, less than 1 in 10. So it's 10%. So it's 7%,
sad?
less than 10.
That's such a sad statement.
It is a sad statistic. And then I had a conversation with Sandra Brown about how many people she thought was predatory. She said roughly 1 in 5, about 20%.
Oh, wow.
I know. And when you add up all the cluster B government statistics, they do add up roughly to that number.
Oh, really? Well, it's like, and I think in my book, the only statistics I could find was 1 in 10 have personality disorders, but I think it's more than that, don't you?
Oh, definitely. It's more than that, for sure.
I think, it's just like those statistics. What percent are really happy in marriage? I think those are wrong. I think the statistics are wrong.
I know why the statistics are wrong for the DSM-5 for the cluster B personalities, because they don't come in and they're not reimbursable for insurances. So it's really not any reason for us to diagnose them, but also they're just not motivated to change because they feel entitled and privileged and special.
Of course.
I want to get to how people can find you, but let's hop over to the podcast extra and talk about just absolute signs of disaster in a relationship that maybe we miss. You talk about characteristics that are warnings. Maybe we can talk about what is a sign that this relationship is not healthy. And I'd love to get into that with you. But where can people find you, and where can they find the book?
People can find me on my website at marriagecrisismanager.com. I want people to know also that I'm a prolific blog writer, and you'll find the Dr. Becky blog on Medium. And I'm trying to just download everything I know in those blogs. And my book is, I think I want out What to Do When One of You Wants to End Your Marriage. And that's at all major bookstores in audiobook, digital, and hard copy. And I read the audiobook. So that Southern drawl.
That's wonderful. So thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Whetstone. It was wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? You can find me at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. Or you can learn more about me and my resources, such as the Toxic Free Relationship Club, at kerrymcavoyphd.com. And I'll see you back here next week.